Many seek the path to victory, but only one can stand glorious over all. From the Badlands come the orcs and goblins, a green tide of brutal creatures that must be stopped.
Hello and welcome to another Total War Warhammer guide. Today we are looking at the Orc Boar Boyz and their slightly bigger brothers, the Orc Boar Boyz Big Uns. Most Orc units have a bigger version. Basically they're the larger, stronger versions that get promoted into a different unit, and we'll be looking at the differences in between them, then how we're going to use them in a fight, and also just basic look through their stats. So let's have a look at the Orc Boar Boyz. They do look spectacular looking. This is a sort of standard cavalry, sort of heavyish cavalry. We've got the Goblin Wolf Riders, who are the light cavalry. So these are the sort of standard guys. Pretty cheap for what they do. Both units come as a unit of 45. So first off, they're shielded, which is really helpful. It helps block incoming arrows. That means they can charge down those missile infantry without too much of a worry. They're also armor piercing. They carry big choppers. No, that's not a euphemism. That's what their weapons are called, choppers. They don't call them swords because they're orcs. And they're armor piercing, so they can take on heavily armored troops, and they're anti-infantry because they're the perfect, sort of size for the charge. The charge does a lot of damage. The boars themselves have tusks. It's going to be painful when one of these guys charges at you. So let's have a look at them. So we can see that their armor is 55, which is it's okay. Their leadership of 60, which is pretty decent for Orcs and Goblin army. Speed is very good at 60. They do a decent amount of damage, and they have a decent charge bonus. The biggest thing about them is obviously charge troops. They're shock troops. We'll go into more detail how to use them shortly. Let's have a look at the difference in between the big uns and the normal ones. The big uns have giant shoulder pads. That's the difference. Same size unit. They have another 500 piercing. 500 piercing? That doesn't even make any sense. 500 hit points. You can tell it's late. 500 hit points over the normal units. They've got the same amount of armour. And they've got slightly better leadership. 4 extra leadership. They're tiny bit quicker. They do a little bit more damage. And they've got quite a bit better charge with 48 charge. So the major difference is they're what's called a sort of skill for the orcs is the bigger and ardour. So the heaviest and strongest of orcs, the big uns are eager to prove themselves against enemies of all sizes. So they just want to fight. They don't care. So there's not a great deal of difference. It's a slight upgrade, but both they perform pretty much the same role, I would say, in the army. Let's get them stuck in and talk about how they fight. This is obviously just a little skirmish game, just to sort of see them in action, really. So we'll send them over there. Up against some little lowly spearmen who always stand over here. They don't know what's about to hit them. Although spearmen, decent against cavalry. So these are relatively cheap units. The major difference in the Orc and Goblin army is that you've got Boar Riders, the Orc Boar Riders, and the Goblin Wolf Riders. The Goblin Wolf Riders, they're a bit quicker, they're much less armoured, they do less damage. I would tend to use those more for goblins for hunting down artillery, maybe going after ranged units and stuff like this. These guys, I prefer to use them as slightly differently, in that I like to use them as more of a counter charge, a flank charge unit. So maybe just sitting on the flanks of the army, waiting for them to sort of clash together, and then use these orcs to manoeuvre and get a decent charge in the flank. I think that's the best way to use them. You can still use them as a unit that goes off and hunts down those artillery units and stuff like that. Let's get them in combat. Let's see the charge in action. That's got to be a scary thing. Oh, that's rude. That's just disgusting. So as you can see, the big uns don't wear shields, but they're slightly heavy armoured and they use their spear. That's why they've got the sort of better charge. So we're going to just send them off around here. Charge them into the sides. Lovely. Oh, the carnage. I love the distance that you can punt somebody. I think there should be some sort of competition to see how far you can punt an enemy unit. So as you can see, these units can't get wrapped up too long in Coventry. No, they're not playing in Coventry. This is the old world. in combat. You want them to basically use them to finish off units, to break units, and then move on to the next target. You don't really want them sitting around like this, sitting in combat, because they will get worn down, and they're not that heavily armoured. And obviously the biggest use of them is that charge. You know, the initial charge wiped out half that enemy unit. You want to send the second unit in, break them, and then move on. There we go, guys. There's the Orc Cavalry. We're going to do all the units in the Warhammer world, or in the game anyway. If you were to do every unit that's on the tabletop version, I'd be here for the next 6 months. But that's all the units in the Total Warhammer guide. All of the units from every single race. We're going to go on to advanced tactics next and talk about more, broader strokes, how to army compositions, campaign levels and stuff like that. Thank you very much for joining me, guys. I'll see you on the next one.